Branch Director Confrack, why did you hire humans? Feeling the scornful gazes of his junior counterparts from the system core worlds, and the claws of their investors, BD Confrack replied, "Why not? There isn't a law against it. It's legal. But they don't even like 99% of our product line. The lunatics, they're... Wait," interjected an investor. "Is there potential to expand to human food as a niche product line if diplomatic talks go well?" "Legal banished a proposal for that as soon as the initial xeno-culinary analyst reports came in," explained the manager, who had questioned BD Confrack's hiring policies. "Their fruits contain flesh-eating enzymes, exotic monosaccharides that will shut down your poison filters, toxic seas that will cause you to suffocate, despite being in prime atmosphere and goddess knows what else. Their vegetables contain compounds that will precipitate the minerals in our bloodstream and rip us open from inside. Their spices are all either lethally poisonous or hallucinogenic. Their complex ingredients contain aggressive microorganisms that will absolutely destroy our digestive biota. We reviewed 1,000 crops and processed ingredients, 200 culinary traditions, and over 300,000 menu items. We found 2 ingredients that are edible to a plurality of our customer species. One is a vegetable that even the humans rarely cultivate, because it forms dense thickets and is covered in hairs that inject poison on contact. An analyst we sent to Earth made the mistake of removing his gloves to get better control of his camera equipment in a field of them. He had to spend 6 local months, 2.4 cycles, in a medically induced coma, and he was screaming in his sleep for 5 of those months. The other? Queried a morbidly curious investor. Invasive species. The translator doesn't do that word justice. Humans have a crop they won't plant in the most arid parts of their death world because it grows too well. Remember our former R&D director, Quella Victal? That tree was why Sunny tendered a resignation. She assumed it was typical primitive paranoia and ordered the planting of mesquite on our contracted test plot of Varnaf Alpha. After 6 months in agri-world growing conditions, that one tree took over the entire test plot and infringed into 3 others. The automated suppression systems were choked out by roots or outright ignored. There were 5 attempts at manual suppression, all of which failed. We had to petition the planetary defense forces to fire thermal lances at it, and 5 third-party test plots that bordered our own. 2 Varenthian cycles later, we found new mesquite growing at a nearby ranch. Disturbingly, being eaten and then digested by feral acid racks just creates optimal sprouting conditions. Our contract with the Varenthian Agritech Consultancy is slated for early termination, pending the end of the government investigation. The usual whispers of backroom deals and corporate schmoozing have fallen silent at this point. A few eyes light up in realization, and a tentacle fishes out a datapad with recent revisions to food safety regulations. I ask again, why are you hiring humans to be anywhere remotely near food? I don't care about the discrimination lawsuit because those goddess-forsaken lunatics will get someone important killed, and our whole conglomerate buried in fines and criminal investigations. Gavin Frack took a closer look at his colleague. They were in the same industry, but she was hired straight out of her core world university into management, solely concerned with legal briefings, spreadsheets, inflicting auditory damage, and her stock options. Her feathers looked familiar. Of course, she had been Victal's junior and accepted a transfer to payroll and hiring for less pay, and at the cost of her bonus for that cycle. Typical corpling. Smart enough to flee the sinking ship, but too stupid to stop pecking holes in the hull. My human staff are valuable precisely because they are goddess-forsaken lunatics, as you'd call them. I've yet to meet a group of people that are as consistently inconsistent. But screen them properly and pay them well, and they are as excellent as any Clarion, Lemurian, Savist, or pretty much any core worlder, with a unique perspective born from their Death Order background that makes them suited to our ground-level operations, he said, in the typical honeyed tone that had got him through dozens of these meetings in the past. "Sounds more like a liability. Make up an excuse to fire those people that are harder with legal," chimed in a voice on the conference call. "That would be unwise. Our branches on Off-Rack 3, Off-Rack 2, and our contract commissaries with the Vanadium Mining Consortium, outlined in our previous talks, are essentially human-run." The Clarion Corpling's feathers twitch at the mention of Off-Rack 2, as she quickly skims over her datapad. Breaking whatever pretense of professionalism was left, she exclaimed, "That's a military contract. Have you gone senile, or are you trying to bury us in whatever scandal those humans are going to inflict on us?" Gavin Frag tastes blood in the air. He might be a chef trapped in an Angusta Clavus, but he's been playing this game longer than she's been alive. Affecting a conciliatory and mellow tone, he addresses the room. "Gentlemen, ladies, please. Although this may veer into the anecdotal, allow me to inform some of our newer investors as to the exact nature of the branch I manage." The chair bobs assent, and several discussion subgroups table their datapads and give him their undivided attention. "As you know, the Off-Rack system contains numerous deposits of untrihexium and accessory minerals needed for military-grade jump drives and shield generators. So, as a matter of galactic interest, the Vanadium Mining Consortium is an exclusive military contractor to secure these important resources for our common defense." He scratched his gills for a bit. The standard introductory pitch was rote at this point. "Officially, we merely provide foodstuffs, the occasional logistical support, requisitions, brokering, and run some of our subsidiary chain restaurants in the system." He makes eye contact with that Corpling, narrowing his pupils into slits and closing his nictitating membranes. "Unofficially, our contracts are a bit more broad than the standard one. Off-Rack 2 and 3 do not have any sort of native culture. They are little more than mining platforms, restricted space docks, and temporary housing. So, what are bored miners, military garrisons, logistics pilots, and the assorted engineering subcontractors to do in their time off? Enjoy the local culture? There's none. Fly back home? It's a 4-cycle journey, and their break periods are 2 decicycles at most." Taking a step back and sweeping the room with his gaze, he said, "We provide culture. The little dives and eateries that naturally spawn around a non-restricted industrial installation, but with the exception of a pesky local element to leak sensitive information. The chance for the mining crews, military garrisons, and transport crews to get to know each other in the third space. Logistically, this entails coordinating shipments to meet the nutritional needs of 21 different species from 62 separate depots, the closest of which is a 4-cycle journey via jump drive. On the ground, this entails using our very limited resources to create a dining and relaxation experience that feels spontaneous and unbranded to our customers, yet controlled to the satisfaction of military intelligence, and sufficiently consistent with our core brand." He chittered a bit to himself. The audience was right in the fork of his tendrils. "For this, I have found that humanity's innate propensity and acclamation for chaos is invaluable. When we first opened our initial locations, our entire management staff, save I and a human, of House Muziazizuzis, quit from the stress. The mining staff were at constant odds with the logistics pilots, and used our restaurants as a venue for their altercations. The garrison was divided over who was truly to blame. Live weaponry was brandished at several employees over a mislabeled crate. The entire platform was one breached drive chamber, or misaddressed cargo shuttle, away from an outright riot. I was barely getting 1/6 of my suggested sleep on most nights. The line staff were always looking over their backs. A waitress got caught with an unregistered plasma knife. It was a mess. You know how a death order handles that kind of work environment? Ambush, fistfight, unsheathes his claws and kills them all." Senior management chuckle, having heard pretty much all the stories before. "Nope," continued Kunfrak. He laughed. This was funny to him. He also ended up defusing the situation, albeit in a way that would get him court-martialed in any other circumstance. His grand plan to pacify them was to invite the absolute worst of the worst from both the mining and logistics crews and give them free drinks. Violent incidents reduced significantly, but local command informed us that we were to never attempt that stunt again due to the resulting hangovers impeding production. Only a deaf welder would look at a situation born of poor communication and irrational behavior and decide the solution was to induce a state of inhibited rationality and diminished communication. Mr. Brezheshishkushwish is by no means some isolated exception, Gunfrak elaborated. Ms. Hogg's takeaway from being caught with a borrowed plasma knife with a disabled safety was to get it properly registered, along with a veritable arsenal of kinetic weaponry. Somehow a legal process that should take a paralegal 6 cycles on a core world took an untrained alien half a decicycle on an isolated mining colony. If she wasn't so reliable, her ability to outswindle a thrice-damned Xrex lawyer would be terrifying. Ah yes, a question from Sir Twistfang of the Corwell's Legal Division. This is not to be construed as an unlawful intrusion into the lawful property and private affairs of a law-abiding employee, hissed the Skvuks. But I was under the impression that exotic weaponry, especially from a species that had yet to finalize their status within the Conclave, was not legal to import to a restricted military installation. She made them. What? She made them, with some discarded tooling, incorrectly formulated mining charges that were originally slated for disposal, but got recycled into ammunition, and some void-rated steel offcuts that were sold for scrap. And she managed to avoid charges? Yes. I'm not sure of the details, but she invoked a religious exception, and gave a spare to the local garrison commander for safety testing. It felt like bribery to me, thought Kumvrak. Not that he'd ever say that part out loud. Quickly shifting the topic, so that Legal wouldn't dwell on the prospect of an armed death warder waiting tables at a restaurant in a military mining installation, he brought out one of the classic anecdotes that upper managers love to hear, especially while they were half intoxicated. She isn't selfish with her talents either. Half a cycle in, the logistics pilots brought in only shipments of Type 0 omnivore-compatible ingredients, instead of the Type 3 and Type 4 herbivore ingredients we needed. A knowing look gets shared among the tech support workers. That old 2048-bit integer overflow bug was a common issue with central servers of older military ships that got refurbished into cargo haulers. It was easy enough to fix and avoid, but often caused on-ship inventory systems to default to an incorrect entry, instead of crashing or throwing an error message. We were looking at a massive ingredient shortage, and what was left was mainly culinary herbs, dried grains, and emergency rations. While I was panicking and the quartermasters of the mining company and military garrison were at the gills of the logistics fleet over the conference call, Miss Hogg showed up intoxicated, said, "Hold my beer, boss," and asked for the 5,000 credit contingency fund in the safe. Since failure seemed inevitable anyway, and Brezheshishkurovitz was smiling, we approved whatever scheme she would attempt, on the condition that she took a designated driver. She returned the next day with a hangover, a handful of parking tickets, and a frightened Lemurian line cook, who later quit our company to join the priesthood. Having accepted failure, I simply asked that she return whatever was left of the contingency money, and promised that when our contract terminated, I would try to find room for her at whatever branch I was reassigned to. Instead, she looked at me and said, "Boss man, once there's not evidence, the cops say we have a whole hydroponics wing now. They'll even tow it for us. Also, you now owe a Colonel Vrak something or other, a lesson on how to make those little pastry things with the snake talk name. You know the ones." "Wait, evidence?" hissed Sir Twistfang. "You admit, in front of our investors, management and board, that an employee was embroiled in a criminal investigation, and this was endorsed by you?" Allow me to clarify. Frak recalled the numerous videos that circulated, and the very flattering military newspaper article. That old deaf-world hunting instinct led her to chase down contacts among the less thoroughly vetted and regrettably cantankerous logistics crew. That old deaf-world hunting instinct led her to chase down contacts among the less thoroughly vetted and regrettably cantankerous logistics crews. And that young Lemurian was caught in the wake. Poor guy. An older Clarion who remembers the story goes green with suppressed laughter. Eventually, her inquiries took her to the HR representative of the mining company, who she subjected to interrogation at gunpoint. "That's a felony even on Earth," hissed Sir Twistfang. Well, it turned out the HR rep was a somewhat high-ranking member of the Black Cartel, trying to build up a drug operation and plot a hijacking of one of the transports. "How did she see through the disguise?" queried Sir Twistfang. Forgive my language, but her exact words were, "Some HR bitch who isn't a complete and total void-fucking asshole that deserves to be strangled with her own overused tongue and thrown to the gators is obviously lying." There was a pause. No one in the room could really argue with that logic, even if they didn't know what a gator was. "Anyway," continued Frak, "it turned out that the abandoned station near Offrak 1's failed mining colony had been taken over and repurposed into a Black Cartel base just out of sensor range, replete with an agritech sector to minimize the need for resupply. So Ms. Hogg stole her transponder, flew to the Black Cartel station with a fortune in raw myristicum nuts as a ruse, and some military police in the cargo hold, then gave them a Florida hello, which I'm told means ambushing and violently slaughtering fully armed drug dealers with kinetic weaponry. Then we borrowed their agriculture bay to use as a herbivore-compatible food supply." "And she kept her position after this?" asked a terrified-looking Boniv in an accounting tunic. "No, we promoted her, then promoted her again," replied Frak. "She's the sub-manager in charge of Offrak 3 now." Setting his gaze back at the now thoroughly cowed-looking Clarion, he states, "There are many other stories, but what it boils down to is that my branch judges employees based on their merit and actions, and we've been rewarded for it with the goodwill of both the galaxy's richest mining concern and the Galactic Defense Fleet. Do you have any objections to this?" Silence. The rustle of currency indicates some sort of wager has been lost. Pointing to a shrouded figure in the far corner of the room, with a heaping plate of desserts, Frak announces, "If anyone has any further inquiries concerning my hiring practices, please direct them to Miss Hogg over there. She has heard everything said so far, and good evening." The Boniv accountant is terrified. A death order? Here? One that murdered one of the worst drug cartels in Conclave space? It doesn't matter how good the job is, or how much he needs the money. She waits for the branch director to finish his speech, and bolts for the door. She knows the route. 2 lefts and a straight sprint to the elevator. She can finish her resignation letter on the shuttle out of here. 1 left, and then air. Her feet are dangling in the air. Impossibly strong hairless arms are lifting her off her feet. The death order has her. The end is near the end is near the end is... "Hey there, little one. Did you lose your parents? Come on, little Fluffy. We'll fix a plate for you and call security so they'll get you where you gotta be." "It's... the death order?" "No, Emma, that's not a child. That's a mature Boniv. And your new accountant for the Offrak 3 location," says an old Lemurian, who's about to break out laughing.